Though often called the Bermuda Triangle's little cousin, the Alaska Triangle is probably better considered the big cousin. Covering a vast region that links Anchorage, Juneau, and Utqiagvik, this eerie expanse has witnessed over 20,000 disappearances since the 1970s, averaging a staggering 2,250 vanishings each year. That's more than 6 per day, and far exceeds the Bermuda Triangle's infamous track record. But here's what most people miss. It's not the cold that makes Alaska so dangerous and uninhabitable. It's the geography itself. Alaska is derived from the Aleut word Alyeska, meaning the Great Land, and the name is fitting. Covering an area of around 665,000 square miles, Alaska is the largest state in the USA. It's so massive that it equals 1/5 of the rest of the entire United States. To put that into perspective, if you placed Alaska over a map of the lower 48 states, it would stretch all the way from Georgia to California. And of the almost 12,300 miles of coastline in the entire United States, around 6,600 of them, over 50%, belong to Alaska. Yet despite this enormity, only around 730,000 people live there. That's fewer people than Rhode Island, the smallest state. The question isn't why Alaska is cold. The question is, why does geography itself seem to reject human settlement here? Alaska is about as unknown to humans as the world's oceans. Despite having over 365 million acres, human civilization has only settled 160,000 acres of it. That's less than 1/20th of 1% of the state, making it almost completely undiscovered. Alaska is truly the last great wilderness in the United States. The state is so big that even if you could see 1 million acres of it every day, it would still take you a year to see the whole thing. But what's actually in Alaska, if there's so little human settlement? First, mountains. Alaska is an extremely rugged and mountainous territory. It boasts 17 of the 20 highest mountains in the United States, including North America's tallest peak, Mount McKinley, which stands at over 20,200 feet high. Alaska's mountains compose 3 main ranges: the Brooks Range, the Alaska Range, and the Aleutian Range, which stretches out far into the Pacific Ocean. Below and between these mountain ranges lie dense forests, glaciers, and tundra, a kind of biome where tree growth is hindered by freezing temperatures and short growing seasons. This isn't just scenery. This is geography as fortress, geography as barrier, geography as the ultimate test of human endurance. The population density of Alaska is 1 person per square mile, making Alaska the state with easily the lowest population density of all the others. By comparison, the average for the rest of the nation is 98 people per square mile. The density of Wyoming, a notoriously empty state, is still 6 times higher than that of Alaska. But the reality is even more extreme than these numbers suggest. Over 80% of people living in Alaska live in urban areas. And of these, most live in just a few cities: Anchorage, Fairbanks, and Juneau, the capital. Just under 40% of Alaskans live in Anchorage alone. This means that vast stretches of Alaska are completely devoid of human presence. Not because of cold, but because the geography makes settlement nearly impossible. Alaska is also a land of many lakes and rivers. The state has 40% of the United States' water resources within its bounds. The 86,000 square mile area of Alaska that is covered by water could fit the city of Los Angeles 183 times, or Minnesota once. Of the 3 million natural lakes to be found in Alaska, around 3,200 are officially named. Its 12,000 rivers, taken all together, run a total of 365,000 miles through the landscapes. Less than 1%, or around 3,100 miles of these, are officially designated as wild and scenic. And that's just the liquid water. As for the frozen kind, well, it just so happens that 5% of Alaska, or 29,000 square miles of it, sits under glaciers. We're talking about around 100,000 glaciers. That's over half of the whole world's glaciers. This presents a unique geographical challenge. These glaciers aren't static. They move, they melt, they create sudden outbursts that can flood entire valleys without warning. On August 6th, in the year 2024, the Mendenhall River near Juneau rose 16 feet above its normal level near Auki Bay, all because of a glacial lake outburst flood in Suicide Basin on the Mendenhall Glacier. These floods, uncommon in the past, have occurred every year since 2011. Living near Alaska's water systems means living with the constant threat of ice jams, where ice blocks up a river until there's enough pressure to burst through like a tidal wave. It means dealing with spring flooding that can reshape entire landscapes. This isn't about temperature, it's about geography, creating conditions where nature remains fundamentally unpredictable and uncontrollable. Here's where Alaska's geographic reality becomes truly apparent. There are only 17,000 miles of roads in Alaska. To understand how shocking this number is, consider that Texas, the second largest state, has over 650,000 miles of roads. California, the third biggest state, has just under 400,000 road miles. The United States has a total of 8,400,000 road miles, of which only 0.4% are on Alaskan territory. This means that Alaska, despite the enormous area it covers, is one of the most inaccessible places on the planet. And this isn't by choice. Thus, culprit? Permafrost. An impressive 85% of Alaska is covered by permafrost, permanently frozen ground. Some of the top surface of the permafrost thaws and freezes periodically with the seasonal variation in sunlight. This creates a nightmare for infrastructure. Roads don't just sit still here. They shift, sink, and crack as the ground below freezes and thaws with the seasons. Buildings tilt and collapse. Pipelines rupture. It's a constant battle against geology itself. If you are enjoying this journey into the world's hidden geographical mysteries, make sure to subscribe for more map-based discoveries, forgotten lands, and unexplored secrets. To truly grasp the magnitude of building roads in Alaska, let's look at the Alaska Highway, a feat of engineering built in 1942 by the United States Army Corps of Engineers. This required an army of 11,000 soldiers and engineers, 16,000 civilians, and 7,000 pieces of equipment. The final cost was a staggering $185 million in 1942 dollars, the equivalent of over $3,500 million today, making it the costliest infrastructure project of the Second World War. And for all that money invested, the highway didn't even cut that far into Alaska. It connected Dawson Creek, British Columbia, Canada, to Delta Junction, Alaska, at the 64th parallel. Alaska reaches all the way up to the 71st parallel, well inside the Arctic Circle. And today, at only 80 years of age, the Alaska Highway is already suffering heavily from degradation and disrepair. This is why a great number of Alaska's cities and towns can only be reached by boat or plane. This is why Juneau remains the only capital in the United States that isn't accessible by car. The geography, specifically the permafrost, the mountains, and the sheer distances involved, makes traditional infrastructure economically and physically impossible. Alaska's remoteness isn't just about being far from civilization, it's about being far from everything. While Alaska borders Canada, those parts of Canada aren't exactly the most populous Canadian provinces either. Then there's Alaska's distance from the American mainland. The state is only 240 miles closer to New York than it is to Tokyo, which is around 3,500 miles away on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. It's a 2-hour and 20-minute flight from Juneau to Seattle, and over 6 hours of flying to get to San Francisco. By comparison, it's a 3-hour, 50-minute flight from London to Istanbul, crossing all of Europe. This geographic isolation creates a cascade of problems. The world's largest and busiest seaplane base is Anchorage's Lake Hood, where more than 600 takeoffs and landings occur daily on peak summer days. Alaskans are forced to use airplanes, seaplanes, and boats for transportation and shipping, even though the weather often makes this a laborious task. The cost of shipping building materials this far north, combined with paying laborers a living wage, explains why infrastructure projects cost exponentially more in Alaska than anywhere else in the United States. Alaska's small population comes with unique challenges. The demand for essential goods is relatively low compared to other states, but the cost of importing those goods, thanks to Alaska's vast distances and remote location, is extraordinarily high. This geographic isolation doesn't just affect economics. It affects rescue operations, medical emergencies, and basic survival. In Alaska, the #1 rescue resource is yourself. Unlike the lower 48 states, there's no guarantee of outside help when disaster strikes. The scarcity of human life in Alaska today is especially remarkable when you consider its deep roots in human history. Archaeologists believe that Alaska was among the first lands in the Americas to be settled, with human presence dating back tens of thousands of years. Early migrants are thought to have crossed into Alaska from Eurasia via an ancient ice bridge or by primitive boats during the last glacial period, which lasted from around 35,000 to 70,000 years ago. The ancient fish traps called weirs that were found in recent years on the Alaskan coast suggest that humans did indeed establish permanent societies there as far back as 10,000 years ago. For a long time, archaeologists assumed that humans first crossed into North America around 13,000 years ago over what they call the Bering Land Bridge, a sheet of ice that extended from modern-day eastern Russia to Alaska. But new evidence suggests these earliest Eurasian migrants may have taken a different route entirely, hugging the Pacific coastline and island hopping along the biodiverse kelp forests. So why, if humans have lived in Alaska for 10,000 years or more, are there so few people there today? The first official American census in 1880 paints a stark picture. Just over 33,400 people called this vast land home. That meant a population density of 0.005 people per square mile, or a staggering 20 square miles per person. Anthropologists estimate that around 80,000 people lived in Alaska by the time of contact with Europeans in the mid-1700s. From then on, a sharp drop in population occurred due to epidemics and violence, and the numbers didn't return to their pre-contact level until World War II. Even today, with modern technology and transportation, Alaska's population remains just 730,000, a number that speaks volumes about the geographic challenges of living there. The geography hasn't changed. The mountains, the permafrost, the distances, they remain as formidable as ever. What has changed is our expectation that humans can settle anywhere. Alaska proves that wrong. In 1896, a massive flood of settlers called Klondikers poured into Alaska, heading north for the Klondike region, looking to make their fortunes in a time of serious economic depression. Of the 100,000 people who made the attempt simply to get to the Klondike region, only 30,000 made it. The rest turned back or died along the way. This was because most Klondikers were massively unprepared for the geographic hardship that awaited them. One of the stampeders was 21-year-old Jack London, who would later become a great American novelist. He arrived in Alaska with his brother-in-law on July 25th in the year 1897. By August 2nd, London arrived in Juneau. 3 days later, he was in Skagway, having paddled his way up there with 5 tons of supplies. What London witnessed in Skagway would haunt him forever. The White Pass Trail from Skagway wound up into the rugged interior toward the Klondike. Originally designed for lightly loaded horses and experienced horsemen, the trail, nicknamed Dead Horse Trail, was torn to bits by unmanageable traffic and brutal conditions. At one point, while hauling over 100 pounds of supplies up a treacherous mountain slope, Jack London spotted a pair of shoes poking out of the snow. Thinking little of it, he tugged at them, only to discover they were still attached to a man, buried alive by an avalanche just minutes earlier. This was on the Chilkoot Trail, a path notorious for its avalanche risks. On April 3rd in the year 1898, the famous Palm Sunday avalanche occurred on the Chilkoot Trail, killing 65 people. Native packers had warned the stampeders of the notorious avalanche risk on the trail in the springtime. But the stampeders, with their minds set on gold, ignored these warnings. By the end of London's ordeal a year later, he was almost entirely crippled from the waist down due to scurvy. Jack London returned to San Francisco with just $4.50 worth of gold to his name. The geography of Alaska, the mountain passes, the avalanche zones, the impossible trails, had defeated him as it defeated 70,000 others. The gold rush proved something essential. No amount of human determination can overcome geographic reality. The mountains don't care about your dreams. The avalanche zones don't negotiate. The terrain itself is a gatekeeper, and most people fail its test. Alaska sits on 3 fault systems. Saying Alaska is seismically active would be putting it lightly. Between 2013 and 2018, there were around 150,000 earthquakes, 31 of which had magnitudes of 6 or higher. Alaska is not a place you come to if you're scared the ground beneath you might give way. At 5:36 in the afternoon, local time on March 27th in the year 1964, an earthquake of magnitude 9.2 occurred in the Prince William Sound region of Alaska. The Pacific Plate lurched northward underneath the North American Plate, slipping in some places as much as 60 feet. It lasted 4.5 minutes, and to this day is still the second largest earthquake ever recorded. The earthquake was so large that the whole earth rang like a bell, and modern instruments recorded vibrations that had no precedence whatsoever. The earthquake spawned thousands of aftershocks, hundreds of landslides, huge submarine landslides, and scores of other secondary effects. The most serious of these were the tsunamis triggered, which caused fatalities and damages all the way down in Oregon and California. But this was nothing compared to what some coastal Alaskan communities like Whittier, Valdez, Seward, and Chenega faced. Within minutes of the earthquake starting, tsunamis flooded some areas as high as 170 feet above sea level. Within 4 minutes of the earthquake, a 65-foot wave barreled into Chenega, killing a third of its population. All in all, the earthquake resulted in 129 fatalities and billions of dollars in property losses. This seismic reality creates another layer of geographic impossibility. How do you build permanent infrastructure when the ground itself can shift 60 feet in minutes? How do you create coastal communities when tsunamis over 100 feet high are a geographic certainty? The answer is, you largely don't. The geography decides for you. The avalanche risks in Alaska are high, with 170 avalanche deaths there from 1951 to 2023, while Colorado has more avalanche deaths with 323 in the same period. It's important to remember that most avalanches are caused by humans. There are nearly 6 million people in Colorado, with millions of tourists coming every winter for the ski season. Compare that to Alaska's population of 730,000, and you'll realize that Alaska's avalanche danger is proportionally far more severe. Then, from avalanches in winter, you get landslides and erosions in summer. And with the melting ice each spring, flooding always follows, whether on the coast or in the rivers. Ice jams are also frequent, where ice blocks up a river until there's a large enough mass of water to push it all past the dam, resulting in what is, in effect, a tidal wave over the river flats. What's more, with Alaska's thousands of glaciers, glacial outbursts occur frequently, where the dam holding together a glacial lake bursts, and the whole body of water suddenly pours off into the valleys below. With the warming climate, these problems aren't going away. Glacial lake outburst floods have increased dramatically in regularity since 2011, with some occurring every single year. Even if we ignore the sudden calamity posed by glacial outbursts, the high groundwater imposed by glaciation and glacial melt year-round in Alaska severely affects coastal communities, from flooding to contamination and buildup of pollutants to quickened infrastructural decay. This is geography as constant threat. It's not a one-time disaster you can rebuild from. It's a perpetual cycle of destruction that makes long-term settlement economically and physically unsustainable for most communities. Alaska's dangers are countless: extreme weather, wildfires, volcanic eruptions, and limited search and rescue capabilities. Add to that the constant threat of losing critical infrastructure, power, communication, water systems, and clinics, or facing facility failures like collapsing bridges, washed-out roads, and hazardous spills. But here's what people misunderstand. It's not the cold that makes these things dangerous. It's the geography. Plenty of places are cold. Siberia is cold. Northern Canada is cold. Scandinavia is cold. But those places don't have Alaska's unique combination of geographic challenges. They don't have 85% permafrost coverage making infrastructure impossible. They don't have 3 fault systems producing 150,000 earthquakes in 5 years. They don't have 100,000 glaciers creating unpredictable outburst floods. They don't have distances so vast that building a single highway costs billions of dollars and serves only a tiny fraction of the territory. The cold is just one factor in a much larger geographic equation. Alaska's real challenge is that every single aspect of its physical geography works against human settlement. The mountains isolate communities. The permafrost destroys infrastructure. The earthquakes reshape the land. The glaciers create floods. The distances make rescue impossible. The lack of roads means supply chains cost fortunes. The remoteness drives up every single cost of living. As a state that is far more wild than tame, Alaska asks a high price from those who wish to make it their home, even for a little while. The reward can be tremendous, but the cost can easily be your life. In Alaska, survival always comes first, because the geography demands it. Alaska is a land of paradoxes, at once one of the most inhospitable places in the world, and one of the most bountiful. It's a place where some find their true strength, resilience, and a self-reliant way of life, and where others find a cold, hard end. The geography selects who stays and who leaves. It always has, and it always will. So, though Alaska will likely never have swathes of humans flocking to it again, as they did during the gold rush, it will always hold a certain awe over us. It will continue to draw those who are tempted and taunted by the wildlife out into its enormous wilderness to see if they have what it takes to pass geography's ultimate test.